And welcome back to another episode of the Double Doink podcast. My name is Brenden. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It will be greatly appreciated. You can also rate the podcast and review the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. It would also be greatly appreciated. We are talking some Green Bay Packers today on the podcast, and I'm very happy to be joined by Andy Herman. He is the owner of the Pack a Day podcast and writer-editor for Pack Report. Andy, my man, how are we doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great, Brenden. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Are you Milwaukee Bucks guy?
Oh, yeah, very much. I'm actually going to Game 6, so I will be at Game 6 at the Pfizer Forum.
Are you still on a little bit of a high from last night or what?
Yeah, very much so. That was absolutely crazy. You know, you hear heart of a champion and, what does that mean? How do you define it? But when you're down Chris Middleton and you're on the road, Game 5, really probably a pivotal Game 5, and you're facing a really tough Celtics team and you're down, 14 points. It's just like everything's not exactly going your way. And just you really don't have a way or an avenue to win that game, and yet you still find a way to win that game. It was epic. It was incredible. And yes, still very much buzzing from it.
Nice. Did you grow up in around the Green Bay area or?
Yeah, basically Green Bay almost my entire life. Cup of coffee in Madison, but still in Wisconsin for the entirety. Went to college in Oshkosh, so been in this about 3-hour radius my entire life. So
gotcha. Well, it's an exciting time, I guess, to be a fan. Were you at the parade, I guess, last year and stuff? Did you indulge in any of that?
I did not hit the parade. I was at Game 6 of the finals when they actually won and clinched.
Okay,
so
cool.
I was definitely there, and that was incredible. Something I'll always remember. So that was my celebration, is being there on that night.
So I'm from Toronto. I'm just 45 minutes from the Toronto area. And when the Raptors won, I went downtown the night they won, not the parade. And I thought that was the better time instead of the parade. Yeah. The night of is definitely the way to go. But anyways, let's transition to some Packer talk here. I think I was telling you before the episode, I think this is a very interesting team this offseason. They've done a bunch of interesting moves, I guess, over the last couple months. Why don't we just start with the draft, Andy? What did you make of the haul that the Green Bay Packers got from the NFL draft?
Yeah, I really liked how Brian Gutekunst attacked this. And he's been somebody that's been sort of swings for the fences early in the draft, right? Highly athletic players, usually younger players that have tremendous upside. And for the most part, he's done a really good job of hitting with those picks, specifically Jaire Alexander, Rashawn Gary, Eric Stokes this past season. The big question mark remains of his first round picks is Jordan Love, right? But all 4 of those represented high risk, high reward plays. And 3 of the 4 he's seemingly really hit home runs with. So I think any GM would take that more often than not. Well, in the first part of this draft, I kind of equated to the same thing. I think he took 3 more home run swings. I think he took a swing with Quay Walker at inside linebacker, who has all the potential to be as good of a linebacker as he wants to be in this league. Just didn't have a lot of the production at Georgia, right? But every trait that you would want, every job description that would be, or every, job that would be within an inside linebacker's job description, Quay Walker can do, whether it be blitzing, spying, covering, tackling, playing sideline to sideline. He can do it all. It's just, can he do it at a high level in the NFL? Devante Wyatt, same thing. The only thing that was sort of outside of Green Bay's normal realm there was drafting somebody who's 24 years old in the first round, which is not something they generally do. But other than that, again, tremendous athlete, University of Georgia, which we saw with Stokes, which we saw with Quay Walker. So again, very on brand for them there. And again, has the ability to be a penetrating, run-stopping defensive tackle to play perfectly next to Kenny Clark. And Christian Watson, same thing, right? So you have this wide receiver that, to me, if every wide receiver in this draft hits their ceiling, I think Christian Watson may end up being the best receiver. Now, I'm not saying he has the best likelihood of hitting that ceiling. I think that's a major question mark, but it's another home run swing that if Watson hits, he has the size, he has the speed, he has the athletic ability. I love how he attacks corners with that speed. I think all 3 are intriguing high-end plays. And I think he's probably thinking, hey, if I can hit on 2 of these guys, I'm going to be really in good shape. Then in the middle of the draft, attacking it more from like a solid player, getting guys who could all potentially contribute, whether it be a Zach Tom, a Kingsley Enagbare, a Sean Ryan, those type of players who are guys who could potentially contribute. Romeo Doubs, same thing. And then in the 7th round, getting 4 guys who you're just looking for something, whether it be a run-stuffing defensive tackle, a special teams player, an offensive tackle who could maybe be a swing guy down the line. I liked how he attacked all 3 phases of the draft with very specific in very different ways, I guess I should say.
Romeo Doubs is like one of my he was like my draft crush, like the later round receiver draft crush. I watched a lot of Nevada's offense randomly during the draft process, and they were very fun to watch. I thought they were like the most fun offense I kind of studied throughout the draft process. I want to focus on Christian Watson, though, because I do think this is probably the most polarizing pick, I guess, that the Packers made. So they trade up in the second round and get him. What's the process for him look like over the next few months? Because this is a very raw guy. Doesn't have a lot of, like he hasn't ran a lot of the route tree that he's going to want to run in the NFL. Doesn't have a lot of experience that way. What does, I guess, the next couple months look like for him? Because my guess is Aaron Rodgers doesn't show up to mini camp. Is that correct? Like, how much work is he going to get with Rodgers before week 1?
Yeah, it sounds like Rodgers may make a couple appearances here and there on a couple things, but no guarantees. I don't think anything's set in stone yet, but for the most part, it's likely going to be Jordan Love getting the vast majority of the reps. I know from an optics standpoint, from the outside, everyone's like, well, they've got Sammy Watkins and Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson and, all these new receivers, et cetera. And you're like, well, Aaron Rodgers got to be there to learn everything with these new receivers. And I almost sort of feel the opposite, right? So MVS went in an interview last year and said, in Green Bay, there's two different offenses that you have to learn. You have to learn the Matt LaFleur offense, and then you have to learn the Aaron Rodgers offense and what he does at the line of scrimmage and the checks and everything that he demands, and throwing out an audible from 4 years ago that you may not have even ever heard before. Like, there's two different offenses that you basically have to learn. And whether you're a Sammy Watkins or whether you're a Christian Watson, just coming in and trying to master that Matt LaFleur offense first is going to be plenty for all of these players to handle in rookie mini camps and OTAs. I go back to a few years ago when Matt LaFleur first came here. I interviewed a former Wisconsin Badger, Taylor Merritz, who played with Matt LaFleur in Tennessee. And I asked him, what is the hardest position to learn in the Matt LaFleur offense? And without hesitation, he said wide receiver. He said they asked him to do so many different things at wide receiver that it's a very difficult position to pick up for Matt LaFleur. So Watson and Dobbs and Sammy Watkins and, Samori Toure and all these different players are going to have everything that they can handle in OTAs, rookie mini camps, et cetera, just learning the Matt LaFleur offense, where I actually might think it's a benefit that you're not starting to get Aaron Rodgers in your ear and throwing all these different audibles and everything else. So I think they're going to have a very dedicated period of time where they're learning the LaFleur offense and the way to do things. And then once training camp comes, now you're going to get the crash course in that Aaron Rodgers style as well. So as far as your specific question in Christian Watson, I think there's going to be a progression here, right? I don't think anyone's expecting him to come in and be a true number one wide receiver, but Green Bay has some specific needs on offense that I think he can help with. I think, first of all, they need a kick returner. That's not offense, but they need a kick returner. I think Watson could potentially help there.
Yeah.
I think, second of all, Matt LaFleur specifically talked about needing a deep threat who could take the top off of a defense, just somebody who has speed that can run a 9 route and threaten people deep so that the safety has to stay honest and that it's going to open some things up underneath, right? They lose MVS. Devante Adams is gone. They need that deep threat. I think Christian Watson and his speed and his ability to threaten deep, even if it's, look back at what MVS did in his rookie year, right? MVS was not ready to be a full-time number one overall wide receiver, but a guy with a 4.3 40 you can bring in and at least threaten on a 9 route or a post route to take the top off of a defense. I think he can help with that. And then what MVS didn't have as a rookie was this ability to be used as a little bit more of a gadget player, right? I think Christian Watson brings that to the table, whether that's end arounds, reverses, fake jet sweeps, even handing it off to him in the backfield, lining up in the slot and doing just some quick wide receiver screens. Yeah. I think those are things that Watson can help with pretty much immediately while he learns this playbook and learns Aaron Rodgers and learns to become a more nuanced, well-rounded wide receiver. I think there's a path for playing time for him in a variety of ways that he can help just with his skill set from day one.
He can almost be what Amari Rodgers was supposed to be last year, right? Like some of Watson's best plays and most explosive plays were wide receiver reverses and stuff like that. No, like I feel like he can kind of take that role.
Agreed. I totally agreed. And I think there's an avenue where, Amari Rodgers can still be used in that role and Christian Watson can be used on the outside, again, using that deep speed to his advantage. So I don't think, they're necessarily counterfeiting each other. But yes, if Amari Rodgers doesn't turn out, I think you can absolutely use a lot of those gadget plays that, I think Amari was originally penciled in for that Watson could potentially do as well. So I think you're just getting a player that has some unique traits and some unique skill sets. And if there's any offensive coordinator that I trust to get the most out of those skill sets, I trust Matt LaFleur and this offensive staff to be able to do that.
Okay, so I'm going to transition over to the first round picks that the Packers made. So they drafted Devante Wyatt, 20th overall, and Quay Walker, 22nd overall. I want to start with Devante Wyatt. Any concern about his off-field issues or his age? Because I'm kind of an ageist when it comes to the draft. I'm not a fan of taking a guy that's 24 years old in the first round, but any concerns on those two factors for Devante Wyatt?
Yeah, as far as the off the field, it's probably a bit above my pay grade, right? So, clearly that's something that has to be addressed by the Packers front office, and they clearly felt okay with it. Whether they should or shouldn't have will probably remain to be seen. I do know the charges were thrown out. So again, it's probably an area where I don't, claim myself to be an expert, and I try to almost stay away from some of that stuff.
No, fair enough. Yeah.
To me, sports is like, it's the fun stuff, and having to cover that stuff is the worst of it. So we'll see. I think, again, if there's any off-field concerns moving forward, it's something that Brian Gutekunst is going to have to answer for, because that was clearly something that was in his background. But I know they brought him in for a visit, and clearly they felt good about the person overall. I'm definitely all about second chances. I know people can make mistakes, so we will see what that brings. But like I said, a little bit probably above my pay grade. As far as the other question, the age question, I will say this: Brian Gutekunst has shown over and over and over that he values the younger players in the draft, right? Like, this is something that you look at every one of their first round picks. They were younger players that have a lot of development in front of them. If this GM of all people felt like, we're okay with Wyatt being 24, I would trust him, because again, they clearly value the younger players, as you were sort of alluding to earlier, that you prefer as well. It just means that there's a little bit less probably upside to his game, right? But at the same token, he is an incredibly athletic player that's played at the University of Georgia at a high level. He's shown he can rush the passer. He's shown he can stop the run. Like, at some point, if you're a good football player, you're a good football player. And that might mean that, he's closer to his ceiling than a lot of the other players in this draft. But if the ceiling is already good, are you super concerned about it? Right. So, you're looking at a player who's going to get 5 years. You're going to get him in with the first round contract, with basically, again, a 5-year deal with the team option in the 5th year. You're getting him ages 24 through 29 at the prime of his career. And he's already, hopefully, if you selected correctly and if you hit, already a good player, right? So if you get that, and then you can make a decision after that if you want to, re-sign him into his 30s. But I think he's somebody that's going to be able to come in and help Kenny Clark right away, be part of this defensive rotation. And again, everything I see on tape leads me to believe that he has the strength, the size, the athleticism, the physicality, the agility to be able to come in and contribute from day one.
He's a guy I would have absolutely loved if he just was 22. Like, I don't know how to say it, but like, he's gonna be a great player. He is. It's just when it comes to the first round, and the Gutekunst that you brought up has never kind of been that guy to kind of go outside the box and maybe take an older guy in the draft. And this kind of transitions into my next question here, another kind of Gutekunst philosophy question. So they didn't really address the linebacker position for years. Like, it was kind of an afterthought. And that's kind of the way analytically driven teams have been over the last few years. And then they signed Devondre Campbell to a big contract, and then they draft Quay Walker in the first round. What changed in your mind, Andy, for Gutekunst to kind of maybe flip his philosophy over the last couple of years?
So there's a couple things here, right? So if you look at Brian Gutekunst's overall philosophy, and this even goes back to the later stages of the Ted Thompson era as well, where I think you could start to see a change in philosophy. Brian Gutekunst and this Packers team values youth. So like 20, 21, 22-year-olds, premium position players, quarterback, left tackle, defensive line, edge rusher, corner, and then highly, highly athletic players. So like just freak athletes. Those are usually the 3 boxes that they check in their first round picks time after time after time after time. And this has gone back for some time now. And as I was looking at this draft, and as Green Bay was selecting at picks 22 to 28, I'm looking at premium position players that are highly athletic, that are age 21, 22, or somewhere around there. And there's just not many players that fit that exact description or dynamic. Or like were players that Green Bay specifically needed. If, they weren't going to draft another quarterback, nor was there really that person in this draft. But like, you started looking and you started realizing very quickly that, all right, either they're going to have to aggressively move up in the draft to go get one of these players that does fit their usual mold, or they're going to have to flex on something there, because they're not going to not make draft picks, right? So like, they're going to have to take something probably outside of their comfort level a little bit. we just talked about Devante Wyatt, right? With Devante Wyatt, it was specifically the age. He's 24 years old. They had to go outside of their normal threshold a little bit there. With Christian Watson, they usually prefer somebody that's at a Power 5 conference or has a lot of production and productivity. Christian Watson didn't have that. He had everything else that you normally look for, but he didn't have that. And with Quay Walker, it was specifically, they go with a position that isn't usually considered a premium position player and isn't a position that they've generally valued, right? So AJ Hawk was really the last time they valued that position, and then the bigger question was, all right, they just finally spent some money and resources in the offseason and re-signing Devondre Campbell. Were they really going to, after a decade of not addressing this position, were they going to give Devondre Campbell a bunch of money and spend a premium draft pick at the same position? It was just really hard to believe, but they did. And I think the big thing here is, I think Green Bay with Joe Barry really wanted to play a lot more nickel defense with two linebackers that he didn't have to take off the field. Mm-hmm. They tried Chris Barnes in that role. They even tried Henry Black as a hybrid safety linebacker, but you look at how much Barnes and Henry Black played together, you're getting pretty close to about 75% of the snaps. And I think honestly, they would have liked to have even played it more if they had that player that they could consistently trust there. So you look at being able to keep Savage and Amos at safety, Rasul Douglas, Jaire Alexander, and Eric Stokes in that cornerback room. They've got now Wyatt and Kenny Clark on the inside. You've got Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith on the edge. Now all of a sudden you're combining Quay Walker and Devondre Campbell at inside linebacker. You've got 11 guys that you don't need to specifically take off the field and that you can trust against the run. You can trust against the pass. Whatever teams want to do, you want to play man, you want to play zone, you want to they can do everything. I think Quay Walker was sort of that last missing piece that they didn't really have a guy that could play next to Campbell, or heaven forbid, if Devondre Campbell goes down for any period of time, now your defense changes exponentially because you don't have that same level of linebacker. So I think Walker gives them that depth. I think Walker gives them that versatility to stay in nickel defense and not have to take them off the field. And also, by the way, played over 500 special team snaps in college. So if Green Bay wants to use him there for a special teams that is literally one of the worst of all times, that could potentially help there as well.
Yeah, just from an outsider, like a non-Packers fan or a non-guy that's been involved in the organization point of view, I think the Packers did a tremendous job in the first round of the draft. Like, I think the board didn't really, fall their way for the wide receiver. Like, look, Treylon Burks was the last receiver taken in the first round at pick 18. So, there was no need to reach for a wide receiver. And look, taking two standout Georgia defensive players is not a bad process, right? Like, that's kind of right? Exactly. Like, I think Packers fans maybe out the gate might have overreacted. Like, you wanted receiver out right away. Like, you were kind of pissed off there. But when you kind of zoom out and take a look at it, I thought they did a tremendous job. And the Christian Watson pick, I think, is going to be kind of the dictator of this draft, right? Like, if he can pop, and he's got all the tools to pop, and there's no better place for him to become a successful player in the NFL than with the Green Bay Packers. So that's the draft. I kind of want to transition over to now some kind of team questions here. And I'm going to go big picture. I'm going to kind of put you on the spot. So the Devante Adams trade was about 2 months ago. I think it was like March 17th, 18th, something like that. So we're about 2 months away from the Devante Adams trade. Knowing what you know now, would you still make that trade if you were Gutekunst?
Yeah, so I don't think Brian Gutekunst wanted to make that trade, right? So, I think a big piece of it was Devante specifically wanting to go to the Raiders and working out a deal with them there. Obviously, there was a contract impasse as well. And again, when you have a star wide receiver that's about to turn 30 years old that you need to pay a ton of money towards, and he says, I don't want to be here anymore and I want to go to a different team, I think it makes it a bit more challenging. By all reports, it sounds like Brian Gutekunst and the Packers made a very aggressive offer, as much, if not more, than what the Raiders were willing to pay him. And Adams just said, nope, I want to go play with Derek Carr. So there's a business level of this, right, where they could have definitely played hardball and definitely said, you know what, too bad, we're going to franchise tag you. And if you don't want to play with us, you can retire. But I don't necessarily know that that's the best way to go about things either. I think you can also make an argument that when you have a wide receiver that's, again, nearing age 30 and you have the ability to add a first and a second round pick in exchange for him, not to mention $30 million per season in usable funds that you can go out and get players, which Green Bay has used for sure to get probably Rasul Douglas, Jerron Reed, Sammy Watkins, and probably at least a bit of Devondre Campbell's contract as well. You can see that they've already used that money in some capacity to improve this team and improve the depth. And then again, being able to add basically Quay Walker at pick 22, and then half of Christian Watson, if you will, because they had to give a second round pick to move up to get him. But you can start seeing, the pieces that they were able to maybe make this a deeper team. Now, if you had to ask me right now if I could, have Devante Adams or maybe the players that I just mentioned, for a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons, it's really hard to pass up on, and to me, the best wide receiver in football, right? So yeah. I think in a vacuum, you can make an argument that Green Bay was never really going to get the return on investment for trading away that type of player. But given the situation where Devante wanted out, he wanted to go to the Raiders, getting back what they could, a first and second round pick, a lot more disposable income, and using it the way that they did, I think Brian Gutekunst made the best out of the situation. And I think he can feel happy about the depth and the overall talent that he was able to add to this team by using that trade to his advantage.
So a couple more for you. So Jaire Alexander doesn't have a contract. He is a UFA after this season. I'm assuming that he will not hit open market if they don't get a contract negotiated. But Andy, what is kind of what's taking so long here? Is it something to do with maybe Rasul Douglas is signed and they have Eric Stokes on a rookie deal? Why do you think Jaire Alexander still doesn't have a contract extension?
Yeah, I think anytime you're probably going to make somebody the highest paid player at the position, I think there's just always complications in trying to figure out exactly what that market is, right? Or like what the top of the market is. And I think Jaire Alexander probably gets paid as the top corner in football when he gets his new deal. And again, I think anytime you do that, there's nuance to that. I think it's advantageous for Green Bay to get that deal done. Anytime you pick a first round pick and he turns out to be an all pro, you don't want to let that player out the door, right? Like you did your job, your scouting department did your job, your coaches have done their job getting him ready. He's now arguably the best cover corner in football. You don't just want to be like, well, see you later now after, 4 years on the team. So I think it's advantageous for Green Bay to get that deal done, not only for that reason, but also when you consider the fact that if they're able to get a long-term deal done now, it frees up cap space, which they desperately need going into the season just to be able to put their practice squad and sign players throughout the course of the season. So there's a lot of advantage for Green Bay to get that deal done now. And for Jaire Alexander, if the team's willing to make you the highest paid, corner in football, well, guess what? That is going to be something that you're probably fairly interested in as well. So I just think, again, when you're talking about that type of deal, there's always going to be some level of complication involved, and it's going to take the two just putting the finishing touches on that. I'm not saying that that's where they're at right now. I don't know that for sure, but it just seems to me that both of these sides are better off getting that deal done than not. And I think ultimately it does get done. If not, you're looking at probably a franchise tag or a similar situation to Devante where they franchise tag and trade if really things come to an impasse next offseason.
Is David Bakhtiari fully healthy? What's going on with him?
Yeah, we don't really know. Everyone from the Packers organization seems to be very confident that he's going to be healthy going into the season. But we heard all last year that he's going to get healthy, and he never did. So I think there's always a level of concern anytime you have an ACL that goes over a year and things just didn't seem right. But again, the Packers organization seems very confident. It's not like they went out and aggressively got a left tackle in free agency or the draft that would make you go, I wonder if maybe they're not so confident. So every indication is that he's going to be healthy going into the year. But until we see him get through training camp, preseason, and start playing the year, I think there's always going to be some level of trepidation. But so far, things, at least according to the Packers, seem to be trending in the right direction.
So their wide receiver room right now, I guess if the season started today, you'd have Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins probably being 1-2. Do you think that they add another wide receiver in free agency? Because the one position, I guess, right now in free agency that does have talent left and a lot of talent left is wide receiver, right? You still have Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, guys like that. Do you think the Packers maybe take a swing on a guy like Odell or Jarvis Landry before the season starts?
Yeah, if there was a situation where Julio, OBJ, Jarvis Landry, somebody like that made sense and the contract number was right, I don't think Green Bay would necessarily shy away from it. At the same token, I think they're going to get to camp first, training camp specifically, and see what they have at this position. You can make a strong argument that they've got almost like 8 guys that are arguably roster level players. Now, I'm not saying top level players, but Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, Christian Watson, Sammy Watkins, Amari Rodgers, Romeo Doubs, Samori Toure, and then maybe even a Malik Taylor or Juwan Winfrey who have been in the conversation and have been on the 53 in the past. Like, you've got multiple guys who you at least feel comfortable that are 53-man roster eligible guys. So I wouldn't surprise me if they get into camp and say like, all right, let's see what we got here. Let's see if one of these guys steps up, because you never know too, if a Dobbs or a Toure or a Watson or somebody's going to blow your socks off. Maybe Amari Rodgers takes a huge jump. Maybe Sammy Watkins finds the fountain of youth, right? Or maybe Allen Lazard just grabs that, the opportunity by the horns and says, you know what, I'm good enough to be the guy in this offense, and I'm going to go do that. So to me, they're going to go into camp with those guys first and see what they have, how many guys they feel comfortable with on the 53, and if guys step up to be that number one, number two. And I don't think Matt LaFleur is going to have any hesitation of doing a wide receiver by committee either, where you end up with, you know what, we don't have a true number one or a number two, but we've got 5 or 6 guys that can do a variety of different things. And we're going to platoon this, and we're going to put guys in positions that we know they can succeed in. We've got speed guys, we've got possession guys, we've got slot guys, we've got gadget guys, we've got tall guys, we've got short guys. We've got a little bit of everything. None of them may be that number one alpha, but all of them put in the right spots can do what we need to in this offense. So I think that's the direction they're going to go. And if I had to guess, maybe you end up more along the trade deadline. If you really feel like you're missing that guy, maybe OBJ waits until he's fully healthy to go to the highest bidder when he is healthy, closer to that time. Or maybe there's a wide receiver at the trade deadline that becomes available, and Green Bay's like, all right, we want to go all in and make that move. That to me makes more sense than maybe going out and signing the guy right now. But again, if the price point was right, it also wouldn't shock me if Green Bay brought in a player, if again, everything just made sense at the right timing.
So last question for you, Andy. So Aaron Rodgers, of course, signed the big contract extension this offseason. He is signed until 2026. I want you to put your crystal ball hat on, your future telling phase on here for me. How long do you expect Aaron Rodgers to be a Green Bay Packer?
Yeah, I still think this is going to be somewhat of a year-by-year question, and to see if, he wants to retire. And there's some different, triggers in his contract that can do a variety of different things. So I still think it's going to be a year-by-year question. But if I had to say right now, I think he's going to be in Green Bay at least 2 more seasons, and it wouldn't surprise me if he played 3 more years. So I think, either 2 or 3 more seasons, and then probably retirement is probably what we're looking at. But we're at a stage now where, again, look at what Tom Brady's doing. And even when he's retired, now he's back. We saw Brett Favre go through a similar situation where he, comes back and obviously goes to other teams. So nothing at this position surprises me. These are ultra competitive players when we talk about guys like Favre, Brady, Rodgers. And if they want to keep playing and they're one of the best 32 throwers of a football in the world, which they are probably going to be for some time still, they can play as long as they want. So I'm going to still say 2 to 3 years in Green Bay and then a retirement, but nothing would shock me at all, whether that means retirement, going to another team, playing longer, playing shorter. Literally everything is in play, but that would be my guess right now.
Andy, Herman, thank you so much for doing this. Why don't you plug in anything you want the listeners to take a look at before we go?
Yeah, make sure to check out Pack a Day Podcast on YouTube, as well as wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and check out Packer Report as well. But yeah, appreciate you having me on. This was great.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time, man. Appreciate it. Enjoy. Hope the Bucks keep going, man.
Love it. Can't wait.